Okay, welcome to the PSSD Network podcast, episode 2. Today's podcast is going to be all around the moment of realization. So, the moment we realized that we have PSSD, the moment we clocked onto that piece of information, what steps we took, who we talked to, and kind of how we responded to the early realization. If you haven't listened to episode 1, I highly recommend it. It's 4 sufferers in their 20s from around the world talking about what it's like to live with this condition. If you're interested in participating, please get in touch. It would be good to hear from sufferers, family members, interested professionals. Just get in touch in any way, any channel. Today's participants, we're all based in England. We've got Roy. Hi, Roy.
Yeah. Hi.
You got PSSD from citalopram. Simon.
That's
Hi,
right.
Simon.
Oh, yeah.
And you got PSSD from, citalopram, Zoloft, venlafaxine, one of those.
Yeah.
And myself, I got PSSD from Zoloft. This conversation might go into some darkish places, but it might provide some relief and some hope to sufferers too, and we need that. The goal is not to bring us all down, but sometimes we do have to be honest about this condition to show people what it's really like. And we do this in the interests of driving knowledge and understanding into PSSD. Okay, so let's make a start here. As I said in the intro there, the point today is to think a little bit about what it felt like and how we responded when we first realized that we have PSSD. My story, I didn't realize that the sexual dysfunction that I had on Zoloft was a problem. I just thought that was normal. I thought sexual dysfunction is normal on antidepressants. So I didn't report it to my doctor. I didn't Google it. I didn't do anything. I just thought, hey, this is what happens when you have antidepressants. It was only months after I stopped taking the drug that the penny slowly dropped. So it was a very gradual realization for me, and that culminated in quite a bruising Christmas 2022 experience, where I began, like the penny began to drop. That I had not just some basic dysfunction that will resolve, but actually some sort of long-term / permanent injury. So I might come to you first, Simon. When did you come to the realization that you have PSSD?
Sorry, carry on.
Was it something gradual? Was it very instantaneous? Kind of, how did you come to the knowledge that you have PSSD?
It was gradual and then instantaneous. So I had the symptoms like the genital numbness back in 2012, pretty much instantly after starting the antidepressants, which I started on citalopram. And I just assumed that was just a side effect. My doctor didn't tell me anything about this. My GP told me nothing about any like sexual side effects or anything. All it said on the packaging back then was, don't drive while operating heavy machinery. So I had no warning that this could happen. So over the years, from 2012 to 2022, I had like difficulty sexually, and it led to a lot of confusion about like sexuality and just so much turmoil and not knowing the reason. I thought it was depression or diet or something like that. But again, like you, I had quite a bruising Christmas 2022 because I came across Joe McFarlane's Mail on Sunday article about the hidden epidemic of PSSD. And that was brought about by the guys at PSSD Network. So obviously I've got a lot to thank them for, because I would have carried on blind wondering why I've got numb genitals, like almost zero emotional range, not being able to feel the effects of alcohol anymore, just having no lust for life anymore and no excitement from what used to give me like a real adrenaline rush. So that was my real realization, was seeing the news article. And then I also saw another article in the Metro about a chap in London who's had the same situation, and I read that he'd seen a neurologist and a urologist and nobody could help him. And as soon as I read that, my world just fell apart, and I was like bedridden for about a month after finding out. I didn't leave my house. I just thought, well, half of me is dead. I just thought, like, this is so dark and so bad, the fact that this can happen. And also I had like I actually discussed this in the Independent in Ireland newspaper. It was published last week, and it was just saying how you kind of regret the life you could have had, you regret the injury you've had, and you also regret it gives you pain to worry about what you're missing out on in the future as well. And it's not just about sex; it's about being able to enjoy life. Like, it's affecting my career as well and things like that. So yeah, that my point of realization was seeing a news article. That was the moment I knew PSSD even existed. So had I come across another news article years before, I would have instantly been like, that's definitely me, because it matches, all of my symptoms match up exactly to what's happened to me. And I've since been tested positive for small fibre neuropathy. So maybe that has something to do with what's happened as well.
So you mentioned it was Christmas 22 that you sort of realized. It's just by pure coincidence, I had the same experience. Now, my brain, I think I've got all these coping mechanisms where my brain just didn't really let me look at it properly. Whereas I was kind of becoming aware of this thing called PSSD, and my brain was going, no, not me, no, no. And my brain only allowed the information in over a period of months. So it was kind of a gradual awareness for me.
Yeah.
But it sounded from what you said that it was more of a kind of instantaneous realization over Christmas.
Yeah.
Christmas is a really hard time of year for a lot of people with mental health issues. Well, just people in general, actually. It's not always, it's that juxtaposition between how jolly it's supposed to be and things. And if you're not feeling that inside, it can be a really difficult time. I wondered if you could just describe that in a little bit more detail. Like, how did you respond to figuring out you had PSSD in that Christmas?
So the first thing I did was Google it for more articles, more research. I looked up forums to see if there were any cures, and I was doing this on Christmas Day, but I didn't mention it to my family. It must have been about 2 weeks until I mentioned it to my family and told them, like, yeah, I've realised something really bad has happened, and I basically lost 11 years of my life and potentially a lot more years. So it was just Googling it, really, and I was lucky to find the PSSD Network website, which is pssdnetwork.org, and found they had like WhatsApp support groups. And honestly, I don't even know if I'd be here now if I hadn't found that, if I hadn't met you guys. I had probably my lowest day. I rang Roy, and Roy's just amazing. Like, you probably remember the call, but like, I was just in pieces, and you're both brilliant guys, and I just think, we really, really, really need each other. So it's, every day is just a nightmare. Like, just getting to the end of the day is like an achievement. It's like climbing a mountain every day, because like, I don't want to. There's just so many triggers of how my life could have been.
For me, it is similar sort of story to Simon. As soon as I took the drug, I knew straight away that the sexual effects were very obvious. I had a high sex drive before taking citalopram, and like, everything worked normal. And then when I took the drug, like, I noticed genital anesthesia, completely lost my libido. It was almost like a switch had just been turned off in my brain, and I just completely stopped thinking about sex. And then when I had an orgasm, I remember it was really weird. It sort of like seemed to sort of shoot almost into a different sort of, in my brain, like the pleasure sensation went a sort of different way. And it was almost pleasureless. It was like maybe 10% of the pleasure that I had before. And I thought, that's really weird. And then I just assumed it was the drug, and that the effects would go away when I stopped taking the drug. So I wasn't like too concerned. And then I stopped taking the drug. I only took the drug for about 3.5 weeks, and the effects didn't go away. And it was probably about a month afterwards that I started becoming a bit more concerned. I sort of assumed when I first came off, maybe it'll just take a bit more time to come back to normal. And as the months dragged on, I just became more and more concerned. And then I went to my GP and sort of like explained the whole situation, said, look, you know, I took this drug, this citalopram, and it's completely wiped out my sex drive. I have no sexual feelings whatsoever. And, you know, my genitals are numb. There's no sensation of pleasure, and I can't have orgasms. I don't know when it was, but a period afterwards, I noticed as well that my emotions were numb. Like when I listened to music, it didn't really give me a buzz. Whereas before having taken citalopram, I used to get sort of a buzz out of it, affect my emotions, and I could really enjoy music. And I just sort of stopped like enjoying that, and I just yeah, I mean, it was really, really quite obvious to me that the drug had caused all this. And then it took me a little bit longer to realize that I was suffering from PSSD. So after a while of being off the drug, I looked online to see if anyone else had similar problems. And this was back in 2007. So I first took citalopram in 2007. So I've been suffering from PSSD now for almost 16 years. And back then, there wasn't a lot of stuff on the internet. There was like the Audrey Barrick sort of article and the Wikipedia page. And there was also a few people on Yahoo sort of complaining about it and saying like, you know, this is awful. And they'd been like 5, 6, 7 years off and they hadn't recovered. So I started getting worried. And then I'd been referred to see a psychiatrist for my OCD because I was prescribed citalopram for OCD. And I printed off some of this literature. I think this was in 2008, just to take it to my psychiatrist. And he basically, he wouldn't even read it. He was really quite dismissive of it. He wouldn't read it, and he just put it down. He just says anxiety and depression. It's not the drug. And my GP, when I persistently brought it up with him as well, he said, well, the drug's out of your system. It's not the drug. And it was, to cut a long story short, it just started a long process of like 16 years of not being believed by doctors, and just very frustrating, and just constantly being disbelieved. Which was very, very difficult to go through.
Thanks for that, Roy. I mean, to me, it sounds like you're the world's most gaslit person.
Almost,
for how long you've been through this and the number of people you've seen, and you know, that's the reason we're doing these sorts of podcasts, is to make this a more known quantity. And I think just what I was thinking when you were talking there, I think getting PSSD undermines your faith in the whole medical establishment and the whole system of science as we have it. I mean, the fact that none of these professionals understand this condition or know anything about it, yet we know we have it. We know it implicitly. You know, when you lose your libido, it's not just some vague feeling. Losing your libido it's equivalent to going blind or deaf. It's that level of sensory impairment. It's not just some fuzzy, like, vague feeling, you know.
I say the same about the emotional anesthesia as well. It's like I found that was like losing a sense. So I felt I lost 2 senses, both my sexuality and my emotions. And I actually find, I think, the emotional anesthesia a little bit more distressing, in my, like, for myself personally, although I find them both very distressing.
Yeah. And I think people on the outside massively struggle to see this from our point of view. They struggle to empathize it because it's just so alien. You know, they just cannot even contemplate or fathom the idea that you can lose your emotions. That just sounds ridiculous. So I suppose when I say that, I think when we're talking to people, if we want to be believed, we do have to remember how just incredible our story sounds. You know, it just sounds bizarre, you know. And I find when I'm talking on Twitter and things, I get really angry when people don't believe us. But to think about it from their perspective, it's a hard thing to wrap your head around.
I suppose, I suppose it's true,
And I've got family members like my dad saying things like, no, it's not possible that a drug can cause these effects. It wouldn't be on the market. It couldn't possibly be on the market. And that's the perspective they're coming from. And that's what I would have thought. Well, how can a drug like this possibly be on the market?
My sister's a bit the same. She sort of believes in the mental health, the sort of medical system, and that the doctors sort of kind of, they know everything, and they wouldn't give you something that would harm you, kind of thing.
So I think to end that point, I think people are not being malicious or stupid when they don't believe us. It's just that our story really is unfathomable. You know, it's hard to wrap your head around. If I could come back to you, Simon, you mentioned when you first realized you had PSSD that you kind of got online and you just started looking, you know, finding things online. What was that like to kind of be searching through, you know, Google, I guess? I mean, what did you stumble across and how did that feel?
Well, I mean, I noticed there's a Wikipedia page, so that gave it credibility. But for some unknown reason, that's recently been deleted. So that's really strange. I also came across just news articles, really, and the PSSD network website looked the most credible to me. I saw that there was mountains of literature dating back to 2006. So I felt like this is a really it has been studied quite extensively. There's been lots of studies on rats. I don't think there's been any human studies that I know of. So there was that, and I mean, what I also found quite surprising very quickly was that I discovered that there's other conditions that have very similar hallmark symptoms, like post-finasteride syndrome, isotretinoin, roaccutane and Accutane, and even things like ashwagandha and what's the other one, saw palmetto. So there seems to be a load of different man-made and naturally occurring substances that can, I'm guessing, overwhelm the nervous system or downregulate receptors in the brain. Obviously we need more research. There's research going on at the minute, but that's what I came across. Was really, I was probably spent most of my time reading about research, and when I heard people's stories, that just made me feel even worse. It really did, because there's a lot of catastrophizing. I read a lot of people complaining but not kind of looking for answers, and that's why I thought, well, let's not just complain, let's try and do something about it. And that's why, you know, we're here doing this now, because if we didn't try and raise awareness, we may as well just all give up. We need to do something, and that, so yeah, it was mainly just trawling through the internet. And I also went to see my doctor as well. I knew they wouldn't be able to help me because I knew it wasn't a very well known. I didn't know the prevalence statistics at the time. And my GP just said, well, I haven't heard of it, but I'm a very forthright person. So I said to them, look, I need to see a neurologist. I need to see a urologist, a uroneurologist, and an endocrinologist. And so far, I got a neurology appointment rejected twice. And I just gave up and did it privately. I've had a biopsy, cost me nearly $3,000. I'm still waiting. It's taken over a year to get, no, not a year. It's taken since February to get a referral for a urologist. So I've got a referral, but I still don't have an appointment. So basically, I'm just trying to check every part of my body and system as possible to see if there's any indication of any abnormalities. But the reality probably is that I don't think anyone's found any biomarkers yet for PSSD. So it's really difficult, because when you know you've got something wrong with you, but there's you can't validate it, you feel like you've kind of been, it's like you've been possessed or something. It's like, you know fully well that there's something's gone catastrophically wrong in your brain and body. So you really have two things to deal with. One is actually suffering from the trauma of the injury itself, and another is the repeat trauma of people saying, like my mum said to me, she's been a nurse for 40 years, and this has been really difficult because she has full faith in medicine. Even to this day, she's been really stubborn about it all. And the first thing she said, "Oh, Simon, you're having another one of your tantrums like you used to when you were a kid." And then that really, really pissed me off. And also, she's worked in a sex offenders prison as the head nurse. So she will have been prescribing SSRIs to sex offenders. Well, not prescribing, they don't have to get a choice. And she worked in a sexual health clinic for the NHS for a number of years. So she has definitely prescribed SSRIs to patients and prisoners. So and I've just found it quite unsatisfying how she hasn't really acknowledged what's happened to me, and that's given me more trauma. And that's kind of why I've done things like I appeared in the Telegraph a couple of months ago with my face showing and everything. So I just thought, well, actually, it's a bit of a cry for help, because I think, well, how bad does a problem have to be Like PSSD is a catastrophe. It's unfolding for our eyes. It's a car crash. We're all observing it. We know it's happening. We know people are asleep at the wheel, like the MHRA. I had a response from them recently, and they're not interested in helping, saying they're under resourced. So I've tried lots of things, and but in terms of like the medical side of things, like trying to get help, that's been futile. That's been written. I will look at the other areas like urology when I can get a referral, but I can't really afford to just keep shelling out for private appointments. And I feel like it's a real slap in the face, the fact that not only is the NHS and MHRA's gross negligence put me in this situation, they're not even willing to help now it's happened. It's like someone saying, I acknowledge you're on fire. I've got a bucket of water. I can definitely help you out. I'm not going to. And I can't provide a reason why I won't. I'm just not going to. So it's a really frustrating situation to be in. If it wasn't for my severe emotional blunting, I'd get extremely angry about this thing, about this situation. So,
yeah, I think I had a sort of negative experience with the MHRA as well. Like it was kind of a bit of a bizarre experience actually. I phoned up to do a yellow card report with the MHRA, and when I was basically talking to the scientist there who took the report, he was actually sniggering with his colleague about when I was reading out my sexual symptoms. And that really, I actually made an official complaint about it. It was actually like genuinely that actually happened. It was really bad. And so I had quite a negative experience with the MHRA. But Simon brings up a point, quite a good point actually, about how often like you're not only gaslit by the medical community, but like also by the family. So it kind of can sort of feel like almost like a double whammy. Like, you get the doctors who don't believe you, and then your own family. I've heard this so many times from other PSSD sufferers. It's like you just feel completely alone, because it's like you're stuck in this body that can't feel sexual pleasure or can't feel emotions, and you can't sort of react, sort of interact with the world like you used to, and you're trying to tell people about it, and no one believes you. Like, not only the medical community, like the doctors, your family don't often, and often your friends don't understand. So it's like it can be very, very isolating and sort of lonely to sort of deal with it. Like, yeah.
So completely empathize with that sort of isolation idea, Roy. And I'm just wondering if, because you've been in this for a few years, have you found anything to help with kind of the isolation that comes with PSSD?
I suppose like before, I think it was 2017, before that. So I went quite a long time, about 10 years, and I didn't speak to anyone else who had PSSD. But in 2017, I joined Surviving Antidepressants, and I found quite a few other people who suffered from the condition, and I started talking to them. So I got some support that way, like, because they were the only real people that understood what I'd gone through. So I found that really helped. But apart from that, you mean like over the years you sort of adapt to it a little bit better. But I mean, I remember in the first 3 years of having PSSD, I often felt acutely suicidal. I'd have suicidal thoughts and feelings regularly. And I still get suicidal thoughts and feelings, but they're a lot less now. You see the years go by and you think, is this ever going to end? There's people that have been off the drug for over 20 years and they still haven't recovered. And well, Audrey Barrick, who did the first study, she's been 27 years off and she's still got all of the sexual symptoms. And to be honest, that's like her life's been ruined, really. I mean, like I don't want to sound negative. I mean, like, but it kind of is. I mean, with this condition, I can't enjoy life. I feel like I'm existing and surviving, really, if I'm going to be honest. It's not really a life. And I just sort of look at people like that. And when I was in the early years, I was looking at people 5, 6, 7 years off, not recovering. I thought, am I going to ever recover from this? And it was a very lonely, isolating place. I often felt very depressed, and it was very hard, and there was no support. And like, I honestly, in the 16 years of having PSSD, I changed doctor surgery 2 or 3 times in that period. And I've spoken to a lot of doctors, and I think like I could count about 2 or 3 that have sort of believed me or taken me seriously. And like some of the responses I've had from doctors have not only been, they haven't believed me, they've almost been really quite rude. I've even had a couple of doctors laughing at me, not just at the fact that they think it's so ridiculous that I've got this condition, but actually laughing at the fact that I've got sexual symptoms. There's been a few that have been quite unpleasant, and it's kind of quite humiliating to keep putting yourself out there, keep going to the doctor saying, look, I've got this problem, I need help, I don't know what to do, I don't know who to turn to, I'm alone with this. And for them to just, sometimes even laugh at you, it's very difficult. And so but then once I sort of found a few other people, it did help it a little bit. And I think now with the PSSD network, there's a lot more support for people who are really sort of struggling with it. So I think it's a good thing, obviously, that the network's tied up and stuff. So yeah.
So have you connected with, have you got friendships with people?
Simon's example, sorry, yeah. So, and a few other people, that I have made friendships with,
Mm-hmm.
We help support each other, yeah.
I'm very thankful to you, Simon, because you just reached out to me from seeing a post I think that I made on Facebook, I think it was. I'm very thankful that you did that, because that put me in touch with the WhatsApp group that we're all on. Quite a big group, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you didn't need to do that. You just chose to do it that day. That that's been everything for me. I don't know. It would have been a hell of a lot harder the last year or so if I hadn't got into that WhatsApp group. Reason being that I don't know about you, but I find the kind of the Facebook groups and the Reddit groups really upsetting. There's just something about them, like there's like an unhinged quality to it.
It's a constant stream of people just like Reddit particularly is a constant stream of people who are at that moment where they've just found out they've got PSSD. So it just I think it just gives you that trauma again and again. And obviously these people need help, but like for someone who's suffering, who's looking to look after themselves, make life a little bit more manageable, it's probably best to stay off there. Maybe still go on, but don't spend all day on it, on Reddit and the Facebook group, because it can really cause quite a lot of further repeat trauma.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in finding a kind of, I guess you could say, a safer group, because I've now spoken to both of you on the phone, and Simon, you and I have met up, we've been walking, and that's a lot more supportive than, random name, a bunch of numbers on Reddit, who's just found out they've got PSSD and is absolutely catastrophizing. Okay. So you mentioned family members there, Simon, and do you think it's because I'm kind of going through this with my family, where I'm trying not to overwhelm my family with information at the moment. I've given them one letter that explained it, and that was months ago. And I haven't been phoning up every week to tell them, because I've learned other people's experiences of family. I'm trying to play a tactical game, which will probably fail. Do you think you're banging your head off a brick wall, with some of your family members, or do you think they'll come around, or is it just impossible to say?
I think so. I've got two sisters, one older, one younger, and parents, and we all live all over the world. They're all spread in like different countries. Well, one sister's in Portugal, so we all live different places, but we're still very close. My dad's been the most empathetic because he's just that kind of person. My mum has been not really very supportive, but I think she's trying to be like the tough, give me like tough love. I don't know if there's any like value to that at all, but I think she just doesn't think it'll help me, her going like, oh, I'm so sorry. And she might have a point. And my sisters, I find it quite traumatic because they're kind of just getting on with their lives, traveling and relationships. And so as much as I love them and I've got all the time in the world for them, I still find it very difficult. They all believe what's happened to me deep down. It's extremely difficult because I've probably taken an opposite approach to you. I've told them all everything. Like I've just said, because I just think I've got nothing left to lose, so I'll just tell them everything. I have no ego now. I've got no pride left, and I just think like I'm just a piece of meat with no emotions and no sex drive. So it's like I have nothing to fear now. I have no fear about anything. I don't even feel fear anymore. So I kind of overwhelmed them, and I think that has really hurt. It has actually been probably more harmful than not, because the amount of strain it's put on my family. Like my dad got diagnosed with cancer the same week I found out about PSSD. Luckily, it's not aggressive. Like it's actually been improving quite a lot. He's got really good like PSA score, so it's prostate cancer. So it seems to be getting a lot better. But like, it kills me inside because like the last thing he wants is more stress. So his life's been wrecked as well. It's impacted his business. He's like thinking of like shutting up shop. So like that it's had a massive impact. And my parents like have probably got 10 more wrinkles each since I got PSSD. Like it has a tremendous impact on the family. So, and my sisters just like carry on with their lives and try and distract themselves, I think. And the worst thing for me is like I've actually said to my family, just try and forget I exist, because like I can't. There's no. But like, and also like my uncle rings me sometimes and he's like, how are you doing? How have you been? And it's like, you wouldn't say that to someone who's been like paralyzed from the neck down. Any improvements? How are you doing? It's like, so I just feel like sometimes it's better not to talk to family because my story hasn't changed. I'm in the same situation. The only thing that has changed is things like campaigning like that. So and we're all helping with that. I mean, like, obviously PSSD network stuff more recently with like ads running and PR and a bit of marketing here and there, but like it's not just the PSSD network that I'm sort of really impressed by. It's things like Roy, your persistence over the years with like the medical profession. I mean, you've got so much documentation of like, you've put so much effort in over the years, and it's just amazing how much you just never given up. And so it's like, it's not just about the awareness. There's lots of people trying behind the scenes to like get doctors to take this more seriously. But there's so much more we can do. And what really annoys me though is how there's people out there like the Patient Safety Commissioner who could easily send out a letter to doctors. There's 45,000 GPs in the UK. I mean, an email even, like it takes 10 minutes to knock an email together, maybe a bit longer. It's like they've known, like the MHRA have known about this since like 1987. So they've had 36 years to knock an email together. Just do it. Why are they waiting for? It's ridiculous. And it's obviously, it's not just that they're under resourced. There'll be a lot of other reasons. They'll be getting pressure from elsewhere. But like, it just really angers me that we've been put in this situation, and it could have been fixed. It could have been avoided so easily. Like, it's just crazy, absolutely crazy.
It's when you consider that, I mean, antidepressants must be one of the top drugs that GPs prescribe. Like, they have to be.
Yeah. So they can't say they don't have time, because it's like, well, that's a big chunk of their job, so they should well make time for it.
It just from our perspective, knowing what we know about antidepressants, this whole kind of culture of prescribing them, it looks like a car crash in slow motion. And it just feels like a tidal wave that's going to hit at some point. I don't think I am biologically special. I don't think there's much different. I can't imagine there's much different about me. I think there must be a lot of people who are going to experience this condition perhaps on a spectrum. Mild, we might be on the more severe end, but like I say, I don't think I'm particularly special, and I think many people will have this possibly without realizing it. And you mentioned,
I think there was
Sorry.
some studies that suggested there's never been any proper prevalent studies on PSSD, but there's some studies that suggest it might affect up to 1 to 4% of people that take it to some degree, and that's actually classified as a common effect. If you are 1 in 100 people, if 1 in 100 people suffer from an effect from a drug, it's actually classified as common. So, like, it might be like sort of more common than people know. It's like, I mean, obviously not everyone gets it, but it's like,
I have actually looked at some like potential. So the one study suggests, a study in Israel found that 1 in 216 people who take SSRIs, not of the general population, who take SSRIs, so 0.46% of people that currently take SSRIs have enduring sexual dysfunction, PSSD. And that equates to assuming there's 100 million people currently taking SSRIs around the world, that's 1.38 million people around the world living with permanent PSSD. If we look at prevalence of yeah, another one was like 4%. So that's
that's the study I.
Yeah, So and then if you what these studies, like these prevalence studies, fail to like look at, I mean, is the fact that it's not just the 100 million people who currently take SSRIs, it's the additional 200 million people who used to take them but don't now. They're not counted. So that 8.3 million people who currently take SSRIs in the UK, or the 32 million that currently take them in the US, look at my family. I used to take them. My mum used to take them. My older sister used to take them. So 3 out of 5 of my family members used to take them. We're not in that 8.3 million. So we're talking 20 million people either like currently alive in the UK, either used to take them or currently. And then you think about their partners, their family that impacts. This is a national crisis. And then we don't know the true prevalence statistics. And that's one thing I really need help with, is we need to find a way of doing almost as if the NHS were already doing a study anyway. Can we not add on a question saying, did you used to take SSRIs? Did you stop more than 6 months ago? Have you had any of these symptoms? Simple as that.
And there was like that. There's another point that Bryn made about the spectrum. Like I think the risk organization mentioned, they did an article about it, that PSSD might be on a spectrum where some people sort of go mostly back to normal, sort of like they regain maybe 70-80% of their sexuality after they stop the SSRI. They don't go all the way fully back to normal. And there's never been any studies to sort of work out if people regain all of their sexual function and desire. And I think it's like 80%, up to 80% of people who take SSRIs get this, they reckon get at least some form of the sexual effects. So it's like, I mean, I've actually personally, over the last 16 years, I've talked to a lot of people who have taken SSRIs. I've met people who have said that they've mostly gone back to normal, but after taking SSRIs, they've never, they look back and they remember that they've never been as, like, their libido has never been quite as high, or their orgasm intensity has never been quite as high. But they remember that it used to be a little bit stronger, but it's like, because they've mostly gone back to normal, they've kind of accepted it. And it's like, you know, oh well, or they've put it down to age, they're getting a bit older, or some other. And I reckon there's a sort of, there might be a bigger number of people who have a milder form of the condition, who have just kind of, they don't even realize they've got it, or they kind of, they know something's not right, but they kind of just have accepted it. And it might be that there's a big number of people that actually have a milder form.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the spectrum idea just sounds totally obvious to me. So we're all on the spectrum, basically. So Simon, you were talking a little bit there. I think you mentioned some marketing and things, and obviously you're a bit of a marketing specialist, and you've been doing some stuff with PSSD Network recently. Could you tell us a little bit about the advertising campaign?
So my background's in like digital marketing, like SEO and PPC, basically helping businesses be more discoverable online. So helping with PSSD Network has been really interesting. We got a Google Ads grant recently, so that's helped us start advertising, pay-per-click advertising. That's helping us be found for things like, why are my genitals numb? Why have I got low libido? Things like that. So we're trying. It's the kind of things I've probably typed in multiple times over the years, and I wish I'd found our ad, because sometimes we don't rank well on Google for certain things. So there's Google Ads. We've also got Twitter ads set up. That's had millions of impressions already, and people are starting to realise, why didn't my doctor tell me this? So that's really helping. And then we've got we're looking into TikTok, and we've got Facebook, but that's been quite difficult to get approval, because I think one of the challenges is these companies, like social media giants, they are reliant on pharma revenue. So that's sort of a challenge that we're up against. But we're basically doing the job with these adverts and with this awareness that the government should be doing anyway. So like, we're just this tin pot, under-resourced group of people, and supported by like loads of sufferers that help out occasionally. And so it's amazing how, you know, we've gone from, I mean, I joined quite late to the party, so I didn't really start getting involved properly till like March this year, but we've grown from like September last year, we're already at like 3,300 followers on Twitter. We've had millions of views on TikTok. Facebook, the page has just launched because we wanted to focus purely on Twitter. But and then YouTube is growing. Obviously, this vidcast will be part of that. But yeah, so that's kind of a bit of an overview of the marketing side of things. But there are other things I want to look into in the future, like content marketing, email nurturing. We want to get people, a newsletter, maybe an email newsletter for PSSD Network, a bit more fundraising activity, maybe even some in-person activity. So there's so much we can do, but I think the biggest challenge is getting big influencers like Jordan Peterson, who himself has been harmed by drugs. He had akathisia and he was close to taking his life because of the severity of it. And he's been completely silent on the subject of PSSD. So there's lots of people out there that I think would find this fascinating, but I also feel that there's also a lot of like willful blindness about people who know about this, but they decide not to talk about it, whether it's through embarrassment or through they worry that they've got clients that their entire client base might say, why didn't you tell me about this? So I think there's a lot of psychiatrists and general medical health professionals out there who are quite scared of PSSD because they know that it's a threat to their career. But for me, if I knew that I'd harmed someone at work, I would prioritize their needs. I wouldn't give a damn about much. Like, it's just a job. Get a different job. Like I just that really angers me that there's a lot of people out there who are putting their pride and their prestige of their position ahead of people being irreversibly chemically castrated and lobotomized.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? You see it a lot on Twitter with psychiatrists who don't really want to recognize us, and you just wonder if it's very hard to accept the information about PSSD if you've been prescribing these drugs for a long time.
There was one other point I was going to make as well on that note, is that a normal human response one would expect to someone saying, I was, chemically castrated, I've got PSSD, would be, that is awful, I'm so sorry to hear that. But they don't. They say, that must be wrong. Like they think about themselves, and it's like, don't stop thinking about it. To get out your head and realize that there's people who really are suffering. And my usual response is, it's been recognised by the European Medical Agency. It's been covered extensively on BBC Panorama, The Telegraph, Vice News, Epoch Times, The Daily Mail, Independent Ireland. Like, there's just so many papers have covered PSSD. You cannot deny it. It's set in stone that this is a real illness, and anyone who denies it is a muppet, in my opinion.
I think the thing with the psychiatrists I've seen online, often their argument is that antidepressants, yeah, sure, they have side effects, but they help people with severe depression. And that might be true within the walls of the hospital, where they're seeing kind of extreme cases every day. But probably the majority of people taking antidepressants for quite mild conditions or completely non-mental health related conditions. And for them, the cost-benefit equation of whether or not it's worth it is completely different to someone who is in a psychiatric hospital who presumably has a more severe case.
But sorry, the point I was going to make is I agree. Like, I think for severe depression, like the SSRIs may be sort of a treatment option that is potentially could help. But I think the risks need to be sort of informed to the person anyhow. Like, and that's one of the issues we've got at the moment, is there's like no informed consent about stuff like PSSD or protracted withdrawal, or like potentially severe akathisia, which can happen to people as well on these drugs, which can sometimes lead to even suicide. So it's like, yeah, I agree that, like, yeah, for some people with severe depression they might help, but it's also we need to have even the people that are taking them for severe depression need to know of the risks, I think, as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Am I not, Roy, do you not have some experience with akathisia?
Yeah, I do. I came off benzodiazepines as well. I still have mild akathisia, yeah, I mean, it's quite. I mean, I had it severely at one point, and it was very unpleasant. Yeah, and it's yeah, so I know what it's like to have it, and yeah, it was very frightening. I couldn't keep still at all. I had intense urges to harm myself, even though I wasn't particularly depressed about anything. I felt like there was something crawling under my skin. I couldn't sit still. I was pacing up and down. I had this sort of irrational urge to like rip my clothes off my body. This was when I had severe akathisia. And now I have a sort of chronic mild form of it where I feel sort of my body feels under tension most of the day, and I can't relax mentally or physically. Like I'll be in bed and I'll have to twitch my feet every sort of 2 or 3 seconds, and I can never fully relax. And it's quite unpleasant. Yeah, it's not nice. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm coming to the last 5-10 minutes or so now, and as a final thing, I want us to consider some of the things that have helped us to cope. Now we all know that living with PSSD is extremely brutal. I know that there are a couple of things that I do that do help. So for me, I play football once a week. I have some eye issues from PSSD. This is just one of those other effects that we have. Like my vision is a bit screwed from this whole thing. For some reason though, when I play football, I think it's because of the intense focus of it. I can focus really well. It's like when I'm trying to focus on movement and like watching the ball and stuff. So that's a massive kind of stress relief for me that happens once a week. And I pretty much just look forward to that 1 hour a week at the moment. That's the one thing that kind of is just where I feel free actually from PSSD. Other things I've done, I go for a jog a couple of times a week. And I've started doing some small kind of container gardening. So I've been planting some flowers and things. Not a hobby that I was really into prior to PSSD. I used to be very athletic, used to cycle all the time, used to go rock climbing. I find it really triggering to go back to those hobbies because I just don't quite feel it at the moment. So it's been helpful for me to almost develop new hobbies that are distinct from the ones that I had before. Like I'm not trying to kind of recreate who I was before. Like I'm accepting there's some level of change, and I'm trying to roll with it a little bit. So those are a couple of hobbies that help me. I don't know. Does anyone have anything that has helped them to cope with this?
Yeah, do you want to go first?
Oh, okay. I find like reading sort of recovery stories helps me a bit, because obviously some people do recover. We don't know how many or whatever, but I find when I'm really depressed that can help. And also I play chess and I do judo. Those are my two hobbies. So like that helps me sort of distract from sort of the PSSD and sort of the akathisia to some extent as well. Yeah.
Speaking about recovery stories, I mean, it is, I think you talked to Adele Framer on Twitter recently, Simon. I don't know if you remember it, but that's an example of someone who she says that she had a recovery of her PSSD symptoms. I think it took a number of years.
Yeah.
And you can find people, and the reason I mention her is because I think she's credible. You do find people on Reddit and Facebook saying that they've recovered, and then when you drill into it, they're talking about something completely different.
Yeah.
So the reason I mention her, and she's the founder of Surviving Antidepressants, the website, is that I think she knows what we're talking about. So I find her recovery story to be, like I say, more credible. So I agree with you there, Roy. Surviving Antidepressants has a lot of recovery stories, not just on PSSD though, but more antidepressant withdrawal in general.
Yeah.
And you mentioned judo there, Roy. Do you do that weekly or?
Yeah, sometimes twice a week, sometimes once a week. And I find like a bit like you with the football, it helps me just to sort of switch off, and I just have to focus on the judo, and it just takes my mind off all of the the misery, to be honest, of the PSSD. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, one point I wanted to make was you were talking about how you wanted just two distinctly different hobbies now to before, and I feel the same with work. Like I've quit my job of 10 years, and I'm just doing a bit of like freelance work and a few other things. So I am trying to do the same. I used to play tennis, but I probably find that quite triggering now. I used to go rowing and running. So I've not been doing very good with this kind of thing, like just exercise in general. Like I go for a walk occasionally, but I find everything I do, I must have like really bad trauma from this, because I find everything triggering. Like, so I'm really struggling to like get, and the only thing that I've kind of thinks helps is like walking and maybe going for a walk whilst I speak to someone, because I really am struggling. Like, helping with PSSD network, like that's a good distraction as well. I like watching like TV shows and movies. I'm a big like horror movie fan, and I like shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and things like that. I find a kind of a good distraction. Shows that aren't too sexualized. But yeah, I need a new. I mean, I actually bought an old car recently to restore. So that's kind of keeping me a bit busy, just having a little project. So that's something that I'm trying. And I've been done a bit of hiking recently. Like I went to Switzerland, did some hiking there. And like obviously I've met you, Roy. We need to meet up. Maybe we could all three of us meet up at some point and see if anyone else is up for joining, like Carlton. So yeah. I think hiking is definitely something that helps. I mean, hiking's triggering as well. Everything's triggering. Like we've just been forced into a state of perpetual torture with this illness. It's horrible, and it's like being murdered, but you're still alive, and like you're forced to observe what's happened to you. And so you guys are really strong. The fact that you're doing your judo and your five-a-side football like that, I admire that, because like I don't have the strength to do that at the minute. I just can't. Like I've done park run a few times, like a local 5K run on a Saturday morning, but only with like my sisters. I have so little motivation at the minute. So I am struggling, but I'm alive, and I think we're making progress. I've quit my gym. I don't go to the gym anymore because I find it too triggering. So it's a nightmare. It's just a nightmare.
Well, I think it's one of those things. It's sometimes you just have to focus on the next hour, the next day, and you can't put yourself under too much pressure to go out and do things or to be something or to achieve goals. And I think really just we need to take a deep breath and try and release that pressure completely and just focus on getting through the day. I think that's totally reasonable under our circumstances. Thanks a lot for being here today, guys. I think it's been a really good episode. So this is episode 2 of PSSD Network podcast, and like I say, you can go back and listen to episode 1. Highly recommended. And also visit at PSSD Network. Find us on Twitter and follow us. But we'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
All right, nice. Cheers. Thanks.